Good evening. We start with the latest measures being imposed by the Scottish Government at midnight tonight to control the spread of coronavirus. The measures, restricting visits to other households in Glasgow and 2 neighbouring areas, will affect nearly 1 million people. The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, said that the number of cases had been rising mainly as a result of household gatherings. Well, the restrictions will apply to people living in Glasgow, West Dunbartonshire and East Renfrewshire, and they mean that people in these areas should not meet with people from other households indoors. If a close contact has tested positive for COVID-19, everyone in that household should self-isolate for 14 days, and only essential visits to care homes and to hospitals will be allowed. Well, let's join our correspondent Alexandra Mackenzie for the latest tonight.
Well, Nicola Sturgeon had hinted at this earlier in the day, so we weren't entirely surprised. When the daily figures came out, 66 of the new cases in Scotland were in this area, NHS, Greater Glasgow and Clyde, and she's now urging everyone to follow this new guidance.
From midnight tonight, the new restrictions will be in place. More than 800,000 people here in Glasgow, in West Dunbartonshire and East Renfrewshire will be affected. There had been growing concern about the rising number of cases of COVID-19. Nicola Sturgeon said this was necessary to help limit the spread.
These are decisions that have not been taken lightly. They form guidance at the moment, but we will also consider, if necessary, putting them into regulation and giving them the force of law. I also cannot rule out that if we don't see these measures working and being effective, that we may have to go further.
The First Minister said she understood it would be unwelcome news. These restrictions will be particularly difficult for many, as it means, yet again, not being able to visit family and friends.
I think if it's necessary and it's a precaution that the government want to take, I think by all means that should happen.
This is the first time I've gone to Glasgow, gone outside of my hometown since March, and to hear that I might not be allowed to again is very upsetting.
I think it'll be a good thing. I think it's far too easy just now. People are not following the restrictions one bit.
Pupils have been back at school in Scotland since last month. They can stay open, as can nurseries, and plans for the opening of colleges and universities are going ahead. This is not like an Aberdeen lockdown. Pubs and restaurants will remain open. But there are concerns about the level of socialising in parts of the country.
It's really a kind of a message to everybody in Scotland and elsewhere that if we want to keep the key sectors of society open, we are going to have to unfortunately restrict our social lives, hopefully not for a long period, but temporarily, to get on top of this.
This is another stark reminder that coronavirus has not gone away, and it could have an impact on our daily lives for some time to come.
Now, this will be reviewed again in the next 7 days. The Scottish Government has not ruled out imposing further restrictions if this doesn't improve. Now, we have seen similar regulations in other parts of the country, and we could see more. As we start to go out and about a bit more, this allows the virus to spread. So we need these localised lockdowns and restrictions to stop the virus spreading even further.
Alexandra, many thanks again. Alexandra Mackenzie there for us in Glasgow. Well, in another announcement earlier this evening, the Scottish Government said that quarantine restrictions will be imposed from Thursday on people travelling from Greece to Scotland. It follows a significant rise in cases of coronavirus being brought into Scotland by people who've been to Greece. And less than a fortnight after Portugal was taken off the UK's quarantine list, British visitors are scrambling to book flights home amid fears that Portugal could be back on the UK's quarantine list by this weekend. Cases of coronavirus have risen sharply in parts of Portugal recently. Our transport correspondent Tom Burridge has the latest.
Getting away this summer without having to quarantine when back home has been a question of luck. When Portugal came off the quarantine list, bookings went up. But only 2 weeks later, people on holiday there now might well have to self-isolate at the end of their trip. Jodie started her holiday in the Algarve at the weekend, but she's already booked flights home early on Friday.
I need the children to get back to school. My husband's also self-employed, so we couldn't go into quarantine. I really didn't want the kids to have two more weeks off of school. They've had enough time off. So I was looking at EasyJet. There was nothing going back into London on Friday. So we're going to travel back to East Midlands now and then get back from there.
And those who rent out holiday villas in the Algarve have been left in an impossible position.
We need more planning from government. They need a change in strategy, really, so that we can reassure Senegalese guests when they want to travel to the Algarve that they're going to be safe. And people can actually plan forward, because at the moment they can't.
The UK government's benchmark for bringing the quarantine in is 20 cases for every 100,000 people. Only central Portugal, shown here in yellow, has recorded less than that in the past 2 weeks. The situation's worse in Spain, where large parts of the country, shown here in dark red, are seeing more than 120 cases per 100,000. So-called travel corridors have already been scrapped between the UK and Spain and France, where the infection rate is rising. The travel quarantine, which now applies to people arriving from many popular destinations, has really suppressed foreign travel this summer. For the airports, the airlines and the travel agents, it's made a bad situation much worse. The UK's biggest package holiday provider told me a regional approach is needed.
The fact that the Portuguese rate may be one level, is that consistent? Is that consistent in, say, the Algarve, where the majority of the tourists may be? In the UK, we have a slightly different policy in the fact that we don't lock down the whole UK when the Leicester rate goes up, as an example. Can we apply the same kind of principle?
But tonight, news that Greece is going back on the Scottish Government's quarantine list. And the Welsh Government plans to test everyone arriving from there after passengers on a flight into Cardiff tested positive for COVID last week. Tom Burridge, BBC News.